think I'm gonna start now. First of all, I'd like to just welcome everyone here today, um, and hoping everyone's having a good day. My name is Maya. I'm part of the Youth Council for Earth Guardians, and just wanted to give thanks to all the elements and all the directions, and just excited to hear this conversation. Um, and just wanted to welcome all. The title of this panel today is The Power of the Plant, Hemp as a Catalyst for Justice and Equity. We have Arissa, former director and co-founder of the National Bailout, Luis, director of El Frente de Lucha, Mary, co-founder of Kind Inclusive and Accountability, and Danielle, co-founder of Humble Bloom. And this is in partnership with Earth Guardians, which I have not been a part of for more than a year, but a year and a half now. And Earth Guardians is an intergenerational organization with youth at the forefront to combat ecological and climate crisis through engaging and training on the ground to youth-led crews and other young people in climate action programs, campaigns, and even lawsuits. EG is committed to fostering effective youth leaders in the climate movement, as well as fighting for equitable and regenerative futures for everyone. So I've had, quite interest in cannabis hemp. I'm actually right now here and where CBD is growing. So I'm actually like very much like literally right behind me. So I'm very much excited for this. It's something that I'm learning about right now. And just feel like it's so important, the decriminalization of cannabis plant. But anyway, I won't talk much because I know there's so much that I want to hear too, and I'm really here to learn as well. But I won't take long and just thank everyone in joining this panel. And yeah, hemp is one of the most ancient resources known to humans, provides a ready and immediate answer to terms of where we can begin. And in this panel, we've gathered leading voices that amplify the power of hemp, as well as the challenges of the climate change and discussions that lie ahead that will awaken our collective understanding of how hemp can provide answers to the questions that we grapple. We'd like to thank Moon Mother Hemp, our partner, for launching the solution-based series with us. Moon Mother Hemp is a leading wellness company based on Boulder, Colorado, that creates a wide range of full-spectrum hemp-based products on their organic farms. At the end of this discussion, we'll have a few minutes for any questions that people in the audience may have. You can also just type that in the chat and just, we'll have it stacked. And yeah, like I said, like it's something that's very dear to me, very close proximity, like literally right now, to these wonderful plants. I was thinking about even having my video like in the greenhouse, but I decided not to because yeah, it's just good to do it like this. But I would like everyone, all the panelists that is, to just say a little bit about themselves, what brought them to the cannabis and equity path, and what they're working on currently. Thank you, Bachi. Please, anyone who feels free to start, there's no particular order. Any of the panelists can just go ahead.
I can't hear anybody, but I'll go ahead and start. My name is Luis Morales, and I'm from Los Angeles, California. And I'm currently supporting some folks and working in the cannabis industry in regards to trying to get more opportunities for peoples that have had, experiences either directly or indirectly with the war on drugs, growing up in impoverished communities, to be able to access cannabis licenses. And so what brings me to the work is just having seen both sides of the coin in regards to how people get criminalized for something so, and I would say harmless, as far as like the plan itself. And, in turn, they're making billions of dollars at this point off of, incarceration for folks that have been, that have had past, experience with cannabis, right? So I think that what brings me here is also loving, herbs and different plant life, and cannabis just happens to be something that's a very amazing, plant, hemp, the entire family, and so I'm very honored to be sharing space with all of you, and I thank you for having me today.
I can go, as my background is a little bit more quiet. Peace, y'all. My name is Arissa Hall, and the pronouns that I use are she and hers. I'm calling you from the planet that is Brooklyn, which is also Lenape land. I am an organizer, an abolitionist, and a movement builder, and I've been mostly known for my commitment and dedication to Black liberation and service of Black collective liberation, and doing that through the usage of multiple tactics, most recently through being a co-founder of a collective that builds out Black mothers every year for Mother's Day, and really tries to use different tactics regarding criminalization. And I'm coming here today as a co-founder of a project that I'm building with my sister called Black Tea, which is a cannabis justice project, which I'm really excited to talk more about with you. And through a new hat, which I share with the folks of More Mother and Earth Guardians, as a new co-executive director of an organization that works with criminalized youth, particularly BIPOC girls and gender nonconforming folks, called Soul Sisters Leadership Collective. And so I'm deeply, deeply grateful to be here with y'all and to be in conversation, and also grateful to More Mother Hemp and Earth Guardians for hosting.
I can go. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Mother, for having us. Thank you, Luis and Arissa, for sharing. It's good to see everyone's faces and to be in community with you all. I came into, cannabis has been part of my entire life. It's been a green ally since I was 12. I grew up in DC. I was a latchkey kid with like a single mom, and I witnessed friends getting incarcerated, boyfriends getting incarcerated, but I witnessed the symptoms of systematic oppression, but I didn't understand, how that all worked yet as like a 14-year-old. And, I lived this life and I just kept it as a green ally and got into plants. For me, like, I'm very connected to earth, and I started studying plants a decade ago, and cannabis has been one, that's intrinsically intertwined with our evolution. And now coming into it through Humble Bloom, I see this opportunity to flip paradigms. And, through breaking the chains of prohibition, we have to recognize hundreds of years of wrongs. And it really is the only thing that does give us that. So many plants are incredible and they're directive and they help us heal and they connect us to each other or to the universe. But cannabis really is one that touches on all things, especially legislative things. But, I came way through the arts, through community building, through nonprofit, through, like I said, plants, and eventually found myself to launching Humble Bloom, which is an education and advocacy platform that connects thought leaders and community and brands and consumers through immersive, purpose-driven experiences, as well as consult brands on blooming consciously. And yeah, we have, trying to think of what else I want to share about myself with this, but I think we'll get more into how we work, and then maybe I'll leave it to Mary to come up.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm in the middle of like a lot of things happening in my home city of Detroit, and that's important to me. So if I go in and out, it is not out of disrespect to this moment. We'll get to why this is a big deal later, but I'm going to take the phone call because it relates to what's going on back home. So hi, thank you to Moon Mother Hemp for letting me be a part of this. My name is Mary. My pronouns are she, her. I am in New York City. I am excited to kind of like, I guess, talk about what we're all going to talk about. My work is focused on, outside of being someone who's in the CBD space and doing work on the vertical side with company that I work for in upstate, Tricolor Farms and Tonic, and also with Can Occlusive, and soon to be with the parent co as of tomorrow. I'm situated on trying to hold the industry accountable, and they don't want to be held through the work that we do at Can Occlusive, talking about the needs to support voices that are marginalized for all the reasons that we all shared here. It's an annoying job that has no positives right now. I'm going to be honest with you. I've hit racial malaise for the past 6 months, and I'm definitely there today as I find out more and more ways that the industry is against Black and brown progress in this space. But I do want to be the voice of reason in this conversation. I am down for the hopefulness. I am down for people giving a fuck, but unfortunately, the malaise that I think we all are experiencing from this year in our own way, whether it's been health, whether it's been anxiety, whether it's been anything in that form, and just the idea of the need to fulfill the goals or feeling the need to fulfill the goals of capitalism while trying to break down capitalistic states is one you can't do both. One got to be more than the other. So I'm excited to have a real conversation about that. I'm not here to tell you to put up a blue square, a black square, a yellow square. I'm not going to tell you to keep posting fucking memes about shit no one gives a fuck. I'm going to be very honest about where I think we're at. And hopefully we can do something to actually be mindful that this land is greater than just us, and that we need to be responsible for each other, or we're all going to be in the same boat. So hope to offer some light here.
Thank you. Thank you all to all the 4 panelists. Those were great introductions. So next I have a question specifically to Mary. I'm wondering what you can tell us about the history of cannabis prohibition and how it's disproportionately impacted communities of color.
Yeah, well, the history of cannabis prohibition is rooted in racism and a textile war, which is capitalism. Essentially, when we're talking about the whole propaganda against the cannabis plant, the laws that came after that, the continued close to 100 years long propaganda campaign that is still kind of like ravaging and like permitting different ways or like impeding upon progress we can do politically and culturally to make this more accessible in the way that it was or should be, to be honest with you. And so the history starts from there. It's not just about what happened in the 20s and the 30s, it's more so about what was going on before that. So we have to give, first of all, recognition and acknowledgement to the first known historical acknowledgement of cannabis in its plant form and utility in lands that are now called Asia, in terms of like China, Japan, Indonesia, Thailand, areas in that realm. Also giving credence to the second most notable historical reference of cannabis being utilized amongst what we now call the land of India, from our India and Pakistani folks. And then we go into the lands of like Nubia, we go into Africa, we go into those regions, we go into South America. Then we have indigenous communities that existed in the Americas, in lands that we now call North America and Central America. And then we have the utility being acquired and turned into pharmacopoeia by those who are more of the Eastern European colonial references in the Americas. So this plant not only has indigenous roots, has African roots, has native roots, has indigenous Asian, indigenous roots in these countries that are melanated, But when we talk about everything in regards to prohibition, racism, capitalism, the war on drugs, it's all rooted in trying to industrialize and find new ways to incorporate manufactured slavery by utilizing melanated bodies to supply and to fund those movements. And so, you know, that's the biggest thing that I think we now are facing the realities of now. We have an industrialized prison system that banks on the amount of people that are in the system. And those people are Black and brown people that make up the majority of said system in this country. We also have a system that is very aware that the propaganda pays off in terms of people not being able to discover the utility and the blessings of plant medicine in its various forms. We also have a lot of things to kind of like think about when it comes to how the history of prohibition and the movement and reefer madness of the 20s and the 30s still permeates today and is definitely unfounded and had really no leg to stand on when this was introduced into pharmacopoeia in the first place. So I really, really hope that instead of me just giving you like a timeline, like on some like 60 Minutes thing, that we can talk about the whole entire situation of prohibition, racism, capitalism, and the lie that is the war on drugs and everything surrounding it as something that we have to face and realize that we've been misled and that we are now awakening and being way more active and open and vocal about how this has disrupted all parts of progress from holistic health to justice and being able to have a right to live and thrive. And so hopefully that history, while it's not giving you like 1937 and 1945, Rockefeller this, Rockefeller that, that it allows you to dig deeper into the origins of where the plant has come from and just understanding how the undertones of race and injustice have been embedded in the way that we are targeting others, and the whole creation of this from the 1900s in the Americas is important to understand in terms of like waking up to the lies of what's been told about the plant too.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. That was a really informative response answer. The next question is for Luis. Luis, can you tell us about how the war on drugs affected your community and family in South Central LA? And also how the legalization has affected or played a role in healing the harm done in your community?
Yeah. So, I mean, as most people have, I'm very glad that we're having the type of. I'm really glad that we're having this conversation. But at least from my experience, you know, I was born in 1990, almost 1991, and so as I grew up, it was, you know, the time where Los Angeles, you know, was notorious for the violence and, you know, the picture that's always painted in the movies, right? It was all of that, and so, but growing up, I grew up around, you know, cannabis, and I always remember it always being like a positive experience. I never witnessed anybody wigging out and start beating anybody up. I never saw anybody, you know, overdose on you know, smoking too many blunts or joints or whatever have you. You know, they might overdose on the fridge, but other than that, you know, it wasn't really the demonic thing that it was portrayed in the media. I mean, before I was born and during the time that I've been here. And so, but unfortunately though, because of the criminality of cannabis, as we saw, you know, in the political, in the 70s, the 60s, you know, with COINTELPRO and things like that, you know, programs were created to kind of arm themselves and, you know, to disarm communities or to neutralize communities. And, you know, the war on drugs was definitely at the epicenter of one of those schemes that's going on today, right? And so that, I mean, you could go to jail for having bags of weed, and obviously if you have, you know, a criminal record, it's easier for people to lock you up. And even to this day, right, cannabis is still like a Schedule I substance, where if you were to compare heroin and cannabis, I don't think that they could stand in the same room together, or in the same parking lot for that matter, right? So, you know, like again, I saw it separate families, and that has greater political implications, as has been so beautifully said, prior to me even speaking, is that all in your way of, I guess you could call it like social hierarchy, right? Where certain folks are that have, access to certain resources are able to make the rules. And as we know, cannabis, hemp, whichever way you want to look at it, has a variety of different forms. And so if you think about what could happen if people began to become entrepreneurs in the very places that were demonized for so long, you wouldn't have gentrification, right? Gentrification would not be possible, because now you would have people who, in that same community that was decimated forever, now actually has access to an industry that's not even hit its peak yet, right? And so you have implications of the city, who grew up in their licenses, and hard time for having criminal records, for getting busted, for having, for having had cannabis. I hope you can hear me better. Um, but yeah, I'll just keep it to where, like I said, Los Angeles is trying to remedy the situation with the social equity program, but there's too many factors that are keeping it from happening. Because again, if you were to turn around and have people who have been, ostracized in society because they went to actual prison or jail, or paid high prices for these, some people have died for something like cannabis. If you now give them access to large sums of money because they're actually good at what they do, again, that could have greater political implications, where you stop that, annexation of land that gets justified by calling it gentrification, right? If we're talking about, like, the colonialism that, like I said, I heard a lot of good things earlier in what was said, and if we could talk, the politics of it all, like, that plays a bigger picture in it. So, unfortunately, is broken up too many families for something that is obviously, God created, but hopefully, we'll have more collectives and conversations like this where we can start to really make significant strides in making things more equitable, instead of just coming up with programs that sound equitable. Thank you.
I wanted to, Maya, if it's okay, I wanted to just also add to that. I really appreciate the grounding and just like the political and personal context that both you and Mary laid out. My toddler might be yelling in the background, so I'm gonna speak a little louder. And I really think that it's also important, just like in the historical grounding, like especially when we're thinking about like the plant of cannabis and the history, and as like both of my co-panelists have spoken about the war on drugs, and how we just have the implications and how we come to be where we are, and the war on drugs, which has been a criminalized and very much a racialized criminalization of predominantly Black and Latina or Latinx people. It's really important to even think about, like, before cannabis, when it was being referred to and popularized by the US government as marijuana, right? For the connotations to Latina people, right, and Mexican immigrants that were coming in at the beginning of the 1900s. So this has always been, like, the war on drugs and the criminalization has always been a tactic and a tool to push people out, to put people in cages, to plunder people and destroy people in communities. And as Lewis said, to also break people away from their families. And I think that that's just like a really important historical note that needs to be named as well. In addition to, at the beginning of the 1900s, there was also a relationship that was created between the US government, between jazz and weed, or reefer, or marijuana as they was calling it at the time, right? And to say that marijuana basically made Black people go crazy and made Black men want to be with white women, right? So this is a very intentional like propaganda that was created. It was very racialized as well. And I just want to like really like tie in the historical piece, because it really speaks to the current moment that we are in, and just like I think the collective exasperation that we are also sharing in this moment, especially during the anniversary of George Floyd's killing, and everything else that we've witnessed over the past year that's been hyper visible.
Thank you, Arissa. It's totally okay, by the way, if panelists just want to jump in, like that's great with the questions, because it really can be questioned for everyone. It's not, oh, hi, oh, so adorable.
I could add to that too a little bit. You know, especially as we talk about equity programs and we look at legalization throughout the country, and knowing that cannabis touches on all things, like all laws. And when what's happening is not everyone's in the room having these discussions, you know, redlining policy and being sure that every kind of person is being thought of. So, you know, if you talk about California and you're talking about equity licenses coming out and people who've been impacted by the war on drugs, and they're giving these opportunities, but they don't necessarily have the generational wealth to open the businesses, to do the operations, to do the management, to do everything. And then what happens is those equity licenses go into like the funder, the other people's hands. It's like, it's another way of kind of like a fish bait thing where, or if you look at California, you look at Prop 64, and you know, if you leave someone out of the laws, they're not included in the laws. So if you look at tribal nations not being included in Prop 64 and not being able to access the legal market, you know, that's intentional. And these kind of things happen because not everyone's in the room. And the other fears that are happening too, and I think Mary can like, Mary's on the front in like every state, you know, but it's just like, brands can, and I know I'm here to talk a lot about brands, but brands can get involved in this. You know, we brought together at Humble Bloom policy circles, and we brought everyone in the room. Mary was in that room, everyone to like sit here, run through this, write their concerns, get it together, and everyone can leave with that information, you know, and use it together. But, you know, as we fight for equity individually in each state, it is still a Schedule I. And potentially when it goes on a federal level, anyone who's had a cannabis conviction may not be able to participate anyhow. And then it's like, here goes all this equity work down the drain in every state. And then it's on the goodness of the hearts of like, and I'll let Mary more do it, the goodness of the hearts of the brands and of the people and things like that. But you know, it is kind of like still set up to fail in some ways.
There are a couple of things. Like, I think that a lot of people assume that I'm from corporate America. I still work in corporate America. So no corporate entity gives a fuck about people, period. So if as long as, I just want to make sure we have a baseline that if you are Bezos, if you're trying to be a Bezos, or if you're trying to get your, who's the guy that I can't stand, Elon Musk on, if you're trying to get that level going for yourself, there's a level of game that you play, right? And so there's that. But in cannabis, the thing that makes it, I'll speak for myself, way more annoying is that I have an uncle who's 74 who has been growing and teaching white folks and folks back in Detroit how to grow for a long time. He had to defend his life in the 70s, and he did what he did to protect his life against 2 other individuals. He can never get a job in this industry, but he's good enough to be used to help other people do what they need to do, right? My father was a victim of the drug war. I am a descendant of the drug war. My friends and anybody who's melanated, or anybody who has been melanated between the ages of being born now to up in the 50s have seen what this looks like in our neighborhoods, in our families, everything based upon the thoughts and impetus around criminalization, cannabis, all of that, right? So when we talk about how this industry is being way more lean and geared towards the success of white men more than anything, to be flat out, and that's what data shows. There's a lot to understand in terms of more than just that, but the lack of capital, the lack of access, the lack of equity, the lack of understanding, and just kind of like how a lot of these laws and rules and structures and systems are not made to serve marginalized people. We target and we try to shame and silence and remove marginalized people based upon their class, based upon if they're houseless, based upon access to food, but everything, in every single way, there's a way that people are targeting marginalized people in these different elements of what is like a basic human right to us, right? When it comes to accessing cannabis, my idea of freedom isn't wrapped into what's happening right now. It's not wrapped into the fact that I have to rely on a company to take pity on poor little Black person me to give me money to start a business. That, to me, that's not fucking freedom. Freedom isn't me acquiescing or lowering my standards because I have to do that because I am marginalized while somebody who is mediocre gets to do whatever they want, right? So because they're white and they have access. And a lot of these things that are being mentioned in the chat in regards to companies using Black and brown people to get into to the business happens everywhere. Every state is different. Every state does something different to pretend that the other people don't talk about what they're doing. And then a lot of the work that we end up doing, and my Ghost Coalition work, is we contact other states, we contact other activists, we contact other advocates to find out the bullshit that someone else did somewhere else. And they'll try to come to New York or come to Jersey or come to Michigan or come to California. And we have to make that rap sheet travel. We just successfully did that last week for New York, getting somebody kicked off of the commission. So, you know, every state's different. Every business tells a different story about how they want to make change or not make change. And a lot of people don't know the intricacies of how cannabis is working on the corporate level. So the going on to get along idea of feeling like things aren't moving fast is on purpose because it's not moving fast. Meanwhile, federal legalization is moving faster and faster. For the past several years, and Danielle can definitely call me on this, I've been talking about federal is going to be moving faster and faster while Biden gets elected. That is actually happening. I've been saying it. People think I'm crazy when I say it. I'm looking at people like, no, I'm actually partially psychic, bitch. I know what I'm talking about. This shit is going to happen in the next fucking 3 to 4 years. So I think that when we talk about equity, I just want people to understand that what's happening now is not going to solve equity, which is California being in shambles within LA County and with certain other counties. You have people that are trying to get rid of programs that actually do serve marginalized people that are being led by MSOs against marginalized people in cities like Detroit, like the Legacy Program lawsuit, which actually gets a hearing tomorrow back home. And we have places that companies are trying to seed their way through and find golden tokens, okay, to be able to do what they want to do in Massachusetts, New Jersey, and New York. That's happening now. So, you know, for people that want to fall into those types of deals, they need to understand how to protect themselves through legal, through lawyers, through all of that to do whatever they want to do. But there's not enough money to fund everyone that wants a business in cannabis. Everybody also shouldn't want a dispensary. But like, I just think that the current way that we're viewing how to make marginalized people have a stand in this industry isn't through the idea of providing freedom, which is disguised as bondage through fucked up equity agreements and OAs from companies and from white men that see a golden token to be able to help them get what they want. So I just want to make sure that people understand that that game has a limit, and it's a game that won't allow everyone to be able to taste a piece of actually having solid equity that's not encumbered by somebody else giving you 1% when they're using 100% of your access and your affinity as a marginalized human being to get what they want.
Thank you. That was amazing. I'm happy that this is being recorded because I definitely just would like to have that also, like, so I could send to people who like want to, you know, like know about what's actually happening when we talk about legalization of cannabis. And yeah, I'm just in awe of the speakers. I do want to get to the next question, which I'm also looking forward to hearing about CSR models. And this one, it's to Danielle. Can you tell us more about what CSR is? You know, we know that it supports brands of indigenous and Black peoples, but it also creates pathways through the industries, into the industry, I'm sorry, through grants, stipends, and educational exchange program. So if you may, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. Well, CSR is corporate social responsibility, and it comes like a lot of times it's like big companies doing a little give back, and it can look really, really different depending on the size and look of a company. But you know, oftentimes I think how CSR works out is it's an afterthought, and you know, I'm here for building care into the core and really creating programs from within. And, you know, a lot of brands or companies that I've worked with, or you've seen, like it could be like plant a tree or something like that. Here's our give back, or hey, we give a percentage to, you know, Last Prisoner Project. Hey, but did you know out of the 240,000 they raised, 200,000 went to their operations and their travel, and who did they help or anything like that? And you know, so and I know that on a personal because I asked them what prisons they had access to, and they could not answer those questions at the time, you know? So I'm here for, first of all, I'm here for working with community leaders who are doing the work because, you know, I don't have that lived life experience. So you connect with an Arissa Hall and you're like, how do I get into this group? How do I truly support? What do they need, you know, or things like that. But when I think about CSR, I think about creating circular economies and that ultimately nourish the bottom line of a company. So, you know, whether you have a marketplace, and like for years of being in cannabis, I'd ask people, well, what's the diversity? Well, first of all, what's the diversity of your company look like? And they're like, oh, we've got some women. Or what's the diversity of your shelf? We've got some women. Well, how many women of color? Maybe we have an Asian woman. You know, they don't have the answers. Or product line, how do you make your product? Everything's done, you know, within your circle of sameness, with your friends, with your family, possibly like that. So, you know, it's really starting to look at your supply chain and where you're sourcing from. And, you know, the goal is to create a full spectrum brand that is reflective of the plant. And, you know, rather than giving a percentage or of a sale or a give back to an organization where so much of it gets lost, you know, you can create a fund. You know, you can bring in advisors to help you with diverse backgrounds. If you are two white woman-owned company, like bring in a group of diverse advisors to help you, you know, create your partnerships. Like, what do your collaborations look like? And you can offer grants, unrestricted funds. Like, people need the rights and empowerment to use their money how they want to. You know, create educational exchange programs with the farms that you're supporting, things like that, so that people get pathways into industry, they get education, because a lot of times it's like I said, there's a lot of other resources people are missing. And like when you talk about incarceration reform and, you know, expungement, where's the data on that? How do you know who's been impacted by the war on drugs? How do you get access to these people? You have to be connected into community. And I work in CSR in several different spaces. Mary and I co-founded a nonprofit this time last year during the protests. I was doing a lot of mutual aid work, and we co-founded a nonprofit called Breaking Bread, Feed the Community, Fuel the Movement. And we bring healthy meals to New York City communities facing oppression, inequality, food insecurity, while supporting local BIPOC-owned restaurants. And basically it's a cycle of purchasing from local BIPOC-owned restaurants and giving to communities. One of the major groups that we support is Domestic Workers United. And these are women who, you know, make our world go round, but they also passed a bill in 2010 giving basic human rights to domestic workers. So again, it's like furthering that kind of education, deepening it. and creating other new initiatives, like working with restaurants for like a buy a meal program. Let's decolonize the restaurant experience. You know, being able to eat out is a luxury and not everyone can have it. So, but there's power in the consumers. If people can afford to eat out, maybe they can afford to give. And restaurants don't think about things like that. Or what about influencers and what they're doing? Brands should be paying them for their fucking work. If you're active in that virtual space, I'm more boots on the ground. I'm not one for that space very much, but you know, if you're doing that, pay your influencers, and rather than a percentage going to them, why doesn't it go to an org? If you're already doing that and that's built into your brand, you know, I just think that the CSR needs to be at the foundation of whatever your mission, vision, and purpose are. What are your core? I believe brands need to be human, and they need to be personal, and they need to be real, and like we need to marry our day-to-day life within the things that we do, with how we work in our lives. So I mean, that's a little bit. I don't know if people have questions on other innovative ways to create programs, but I think it's more beneficial to brands to build it within and to nourish the community that is already like connected to them and help to build it. So.
Okay, thank you, Danielle. If anyone doesn't have any other comments on that question, I would like to move to the next one, which is Arissa. Can you please explain or tell us how Black Seed was created and why was it created? Why is the work so important? And also, more than that, how do companies engage with you or with Black Seed?
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Danielle. That was like really holistic and just touched on so much, and like so much of what we do and what we've been organizing around. And as I shared, my background and what brings me here is I'm an organizer who believes in liberation, and I'm a grassroots organizer. And I'm someone who has built multiple movements, which has led to the change in material conditions for marginalized people, particularly Black folks. And so that is what made me and my younger sister, create a project which we're still in the midst of building, which is called Black Seed, which is essentially like a resource and consultation project in which we want to build and to contribute to a more equitable and right landscape for the cannabis industry, particularly here in New York. As folks who are born and raised in New York, and New York, as a fun fact, is a leader, has been historically the leader in New York for arrests for cannabis. And so recognizing the impacts, the very personal impacts from our friends and family and cousins and everybody else being criminalized based on the war on drugs, like really wanted to figure out like how do we best utilize our skills and our tactics to support a more righteous landscape, especially as legalization is happening here in New York, as gentrification has already been happening here in New York, right? And how all of those compounding factors will continue to leave folks marginalized, continue to leave folks oppressed and excluded. And so I really am, Black Seed is really coming through with a reparations framework and recognizing that like harm has happened and to really ground in the fact that like lives have been lost, communities have been torn apart, families have been taken away from one another, and like that there needs to be a real grounded acknowledgement that's not just based in capital, that's not just based in brands, but is really based in community and locally rooted, because we believe that accountability is based in relationship, right? And so even as Mary so plainly said that corporations don't care about people, and most time brands don't care about people, which has like made them very inhumane, right? And just mostly cared about their bottom line. And so we are essentially trying to like bridge the gap and to be in like relationship as folks who is an organizer who has much experience and is a leader in racial justice and gender justice, and my sister who comes from a diversity and inclusion background and transformation background, and to like come together to like, how do we work with folks and identify, be able to best identify the problem, to work to create a solution that is actually sound and accurate. And so that's doing political education work, because a lot of people don't know what the war on drugs is, right? A lot of people don't know what the implication of the war on drugs is. And a lot of people do see these problems as very siloed and as like, oh, we just talking about people being thrown in cages, when we also are talking about people being put inside, being deported. We are also talking about people losing their homes. We're also talking about people losing their jobs. We're also talking about like all kinds of things, right? Because all of this is interconnected. And so really just trying to take this outside of just the brand, right? People are losing their kids, of course, right? Like people are losing their kids. 80% of the people that are in women's jails right now are mothers, right? Like, so, you know, and so just like really trying to connect those dots and really just trying to build a solution that is more collective and more grounded in local community. Because, you know, we oftentimes see a lot of brands just like, oh, I'm going to give 1% of my profits. And that's nice, but is that transformative? Right? Does that actually get to the root of things? Does that actually transfer power? Does that actually acknowledge power and acknowledge harm? And so it's a really coming from a tactic and a mandate around liberation and true justice that operates outside of just corporate equity.
That was great. Thank you. I looked at the website also, Black Seed, and I just love the design of it personally. So this question I'm really looking forward to asking is going to be one of the closing ones, one of them, before we go into the Q&A. I want to know what the vision, although the first part of the question I feel like has been just this whole panel really, like what the vision of Hemp's future is like. I feel like that's been just continuously answered. But if you want anything else, if you have anything else to add on the vision of Hemp's future, cannabis future. And then the second part of that question, which is what I'm more interested in, is how activists, youth activists, climate activists, earth guardians, what we can do and how we can work to bring these solutions to fruition. And any one of the four panelists can start.
I mean, I'll start here. I just think Mary and Arissa and Luis and everyone's kind of painted the picture where, you know, this is intrinsically intertwined with everything. The problems that exist in other industries as well. But the fact that there is legislative change, we have demonstrations of legislation, there is awareness, people are asking questions, there's an educational wave. It is an opportunity to take the whatever skills, whatever time, whatever resources, whatever knowledge, whatever contacts, and make some human shifts, you know. And for me, it may look like certain, like using cannabis as a conduit for bigger conversations and talking about race, sexuality, legislation, and in ways that are cross-pollinating, so people can also enter it, you know, understanding that people have very different impressions depending on how they're coming into the space, you know, whether their family members have been incarcerated or there's some, you know, like evangelical, like people come into the space in a very different way. But this plant is accessible in so many forms. And I just think that a pebble makes a ripple that becomes a wave, but something that I say, and it's small, you know, the impact that we can make is really like, it's footsteps away, it's personal, it's through people. And you know, I've seen it from, like, Breaking Bread started a year ago and we are still at it. And that just happened from like us reaching out, be like, hey, does anyone need, any of these organizers need to get fed? And they were thinking like, oh, we're gonna bring like 30 meals, and it was 500 meals 3 days later, you know? So that's just kind of how it happens. And it is through leading in and connecting again with community leaders like Louise, like Arissa, you know, manifestors, connecting of dots like Mary, and yeah, just like speaking up and offering people opportunities. People show up when you give them opportunities to show up as well.
Thank you. And I would just add that my vision is for like a cannabis space that is really like free and liberated, right? Where I think there was a grounding at the beginning of just talking about like the plant as being healing and restorative, right? And just allowing so much access to beautiful things and beautiful experiences. And like, I think what we've all highlighted and touched on was that access has been denied in so many different ways for folks, especially due to their race, right? And to other like marginalized identities. And so my vision for liberation is that people have the ability to access this plant without harm, right? That have the ability to experience the full pleasures and healing properties of this plant and of all that Earth has to offer us, but particularly for this plant. And that people, especially those who have grown and participated in a legacy market and who have basically who a lot of folks are now profiting off of and like living on their backs, right? That they have the opportunity to thrive and to be sustained in all the ways that they need to. And so that's really, really my vision, and that we really operate out of a sense of community that brings forth accountability and reparation.
I think that freedom and justice are very crucial to the existence of this plant being available and viable for everyone. If you do not think about freedom and justice, you will lose environmental protections, which means you're going to have product that's shitty and bad for you. You're going to lose the ability to operate in a market as a small business owner, even as a white woman, right? Because as marginalized communities, I just want people to understand, right? If we look at the type of marginalization against Black people, my Mexican, AKA what is termed as Hispanic brothers and sisters, my Asian brothers and sisters, our Indian and Arab brothers and sisters, women are considered marginalized too. So, you know, to really understand this mentality of what it is to unite and understand the target that's put upon all of us in different ways with different variations. Freedom and justice is something that we all have to equally care about and be unified on, period. There's no in and out nature of it. There's no, I want to be reminding you of justice 1 year after George Floyd with my fucking post. There's no, I want to remind you to care about feeding people right now, even though I want to have fun this summer because I got vaccinated, so it's a hot girl summer. There's really no in and out of this type of thing. So I think consistency with all the items that Danielle and Anissa brought up are important. Consistency in being mindful that these are principles and items that you care about, you talk about, you do work with tangibly, and you encourage others to be in that consistent mindset as well. Without consistency, accountability falls short. Without consistency, people are able to feel that they could just give you whatever. And that's something that I want us to keep in mind, that if we're not consistent with letting people know the worth and value of this from a humanity aspect and from just a right is right, and also from a cultural standpoint, we're going to always encounter malaise. And you can't just rely on people that are speaking on this conversation to do that work for the greater good of everybody else. We all have to take on our share of the work to make this work for all of us.
Yeah, I would definitely say that, you know, hemp is going, it's pretty limitless, right? We understand that hemp can be, you know, manipulated into, I mean, it can replace the lumber industry overnight, right? If it was really about progress, 1 acre of hemp produces about what 7 acres of lumber produces, right? So you can replace the lumber, but that's all money. You know, the old companies, corporations, they're not gonna let that go, because you still got to ship the lumber, which that's, you know, the coal industry, and that's old money. You know, so but again, I think it's pretty limitless, and I can see it going pretty far. Now, you know, as far as how to get the youth involved, I mean, I would say just start off small, right? Like one of the ideas that I've had in my mind for the longest is a community that can be completely made out of like hemp derivatives, right? If it's not the hempcrete, uh, it's hemp, like the hemp lumber, the rope. I mean, you can build something that can last for a long time. And so if you have like a structure that's built that can then be like a hub for your organizing or for your planned efforts, like that does a couple different things. Like it not only empowers you to make that project happen, but it also gives people an example of what's actually possible on the grand scale if we were to channel more resources into those types of initiatives, right? But people show what they care about mostly with where they put their money. And so you know, ultimately that's how we would have to take it. But as far as how to keep people accountable, I mean, it starts with the self, and I think that as beautifully as the other panelists have put it, I mean, it's not going to be easy, and it's a fight, right? It's a fight that has been going on since before us, that's going on while we're here, and you know, hopefully we would not want it to, you know, uh, give it on to somebody else. But you know, if that must be so, then you know, just being grounded in the fact that this is something that we are. It was created by um, you know, the creator, and we all should have access to it because it has more than proven that it has medicinal properties and properties that can do way more, you know, healing than harm, right? And the money's there. I mean, the money, you can have as many dispensaries as you want, and people still gonna smoke. You know, more and more people are taking the stigma away from using cannabis. So like the money's never gonna run out. It's just all a matter of the mindset of the people that are going into the industry. If it's not community over competition, then greed will always win. You feel me? And so humans have proven that they can do some scandalous shit to each other if it comes to making a couple dollars. But unfortunately, you know, or the beautiful thing is that I see us moving into a more communal uh, you know, era in our human existence, and hopefully that pushes us to innovate, but using the resources that are obviously already there. And I mean, like I said, I think hemp and cannabis can be you know, the forefront of leading that re-initiation to just a greater connection to our environment. So, you know, and this comes from somebody that grew up in the concrete. So I mean, you know, I think that it can do wonders. Should it be? I mean, I heard this from a teacher of mine, and I'll end it at this. Right, the difference between, you know, sorcery and healing is the blade of a knife. Right, it's all about the intention of what you put into what you do, and you know, eventually the results will show. So I appreciate everybody for you know, sharing your perspective and for allowing me to share mine. But I would love to keep in touch with whoever's willing to do that, because this isn't something that's going to be one on like a city, state, or a couple states level, right? We're gonna have to rally around this. But um, yeah, much appreciation to all of y'all.
I would love to just add, I think what we said is very important because, you know, and I think Mary has alluded to it, this industry is going to be very quickly taken over, especially going federal, by like 5 companies. It's going to be like Kellogg's, I mean, sadly, and honestly, it's going to have awful impact on the environment because cannabis is like, has so much potential. As you said, Luis, it's like the best carbon sequester, has so much fucking potential. But when you start looking at these indoor grows that turn the earth and have incredible havoc systems, and you know, the way they're going to try, you know, Monsanto, everyone's already in alcohol. They've already got their hands in these pockets for a really long time. And there's actually reasons why they're hesitating, and so that they can grab the whole thing. We're all building it up for them to fucking take over, to be honest with you. So I do think that, you know, depending on your state, the best model is collective models, and someone gets the producer, someone gets the manufacturer, someone gets a dispensary, someone, and you build it out. And like my dream is to have like a think tank cannabis space where we are all collect, because that's where I come from. I have a communal home. My kids are in school in my home with 3 families. So I'm all about, I survive through community. And So I do think that's the way to go. And then understanding that as this plant gets commodified, you know, it's going to be, and we're going to be up against that. We're not going to be able to stop it. It's going to happen fast. So together, that's all we've only got each other together.
Okay,
It's quantum physics.
thank
I'm sorry,
you.
I thought I was done. No, I just want to say that real quick.
Go.
It's quantum physics. You manifest what you focus on. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, cool. I agree. I agree with that last statement, definitely. And everything really. So now we're just about over the hour. We're gonna move on to the Q&A part of the panel. I wanted to give a chance to Earth Guardian, Youth Council, Earth Guardians, if they had any questions for the panelists. And if not, then just anyone can please either unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can just put it in the chat. But yeah.
I have a question. Hi, everyone. So I've been born and raised here in the Bay Area in California, and I currently live in the Bay Area right now. And just hearing like just about this panel, I'm just feeling like really like inspired and wanting to get connected like here locally too. And I'm wondering if any of you know of like any organizations or people here in the Bay Area in California that I can connect with. And thank you.
Are you
should check
speaking?
out, oh, I was just going to drop some names. So I was just saying Nina Park, Supernova Women, Treat Them Collective, like a couple groups that you could check out there.
Yeah, and I also was going to plug SC Justice Group, which is an organization that's out here just building power, especially amongst women with incarcerated loved ones, and developing their leadership and organizing around criminalization in the Bay.
And does any of the other audience here or listeners have any questions?
I shared some resources in the text below for the ones that are currently active. Some people are not active right now, but those 3 are active in the Bay. Social Impact Center is out of LA. They're not in the Bay Area. SC Justice Group is in the Bay. Supernova Women is in the Bay. Honey Incubator is in the Bay and the South, and will soon be in Oakland, LA, Chicago, New York, because we're launching a chapter here. And we're building up some community in Miami. But yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Yep, Ella Baker Center. Arissa just added that to the chat.
New Mexico. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a question here from Beverly. I'll just read it out loud. But it says, can you say more about how to stop big businesses, especially timber companies, from taking over these industries from you?
You said that was for me?
That was from Beverly.
Oh, how to stop big business, especially timber companies, from taking over these industries. I mean, I think that's the challenge. Oh, can you hear me okay? Okay.
We can hear you.
Okay, cool. So basically, I mean, that's the challenge, right? I mean, I don't think I'm, a lot of things I am, but dumb is not one, but I don't think I'm the first person to think of trying to replace them. It's more of, you know, like knowing that I was from background as well. You know, we fought against the police, and we do, you know, we did the whole nine. And but what I understand, at least right now, where I'm at in my life, is now I'm focused on solution. So instead of worrying about, you know, worrying about the timber industry, it'd be more about like, hey, let's find people that are actually willing to buy a piece of land so that we could get this thing going ourselves, right? Like, I'm not worried about what the timber industry is going to do because they got the resources to wait us out till 3 lifetimes from now, right? 4 lifetimes from now. I'm not worried about them. What I'm worried about is how do we find people who are willing to take risk in themselves, because it's not like a real legal risk. It's more of just like, hey, I mean, you know, it has its respect, but at the same time, in theory, you know, if you get solid people and you all commit yourselves to being like, hey, look, we got this much capital, we have an understanding of how this works, and we're willing to see this through. I don't think that anything bad can come from that. You know what I mean? And so I think that as long as we focus on how we can get these businesses, whether they're micro businesses or semi big, like off the ground, the product will sell itself, right? And so, but again, I think that how many of us have an understanding of how do you actually break down, you know, like hemp to the different like mediums, right? How do you make it into the fibers? How many of us have that machinery? Like, that's the thing that we have the barriers to. But like, again, all it takes is having some investment. You know, if that's SRC, right? The social whatever, part of it. You can enter it down, or you get to create something else. So keep more like make it ours to fight and it'll replace itself, because you see that it's more it's harder, it's going to last for a long time. As wood, I mean, you know, it's got to replace it also because it has its pitfalls as well. So that's my best answer to that question, unless anybody knows a Rockefeller or two.
Okay, thank you, Louis. You were breaking up throughout that, but we did catch most of what you were saying.
Basically, if I could put it as quickly and concisely as I can, focus on creating something instead of focusing on what these other folks are doing, and we'll be okay. I'm sorry I took so many words to say something so simple.
Yeah, that's very true. Thank you. So then there's one question from Dr. Vega here. What are some job certifications, academic programs in the hemp industry that needs people? I'm not sure what that means, like labor force, or maybe Dr. Vega can explain that, or maybe it's just y'all understand it, but that needs people.
I mean, there's a couple of universities that are starting programs. Excelsior College, I'm on their advisory committee, and they're about to launch their program. And you know, I'm not sure of the question completely. It's like if you can get certifications, or is that what you're looking for, or? But there's universities that are just starting to begin to offer different types of certification programs. Excelsior is one of them that I know of.
Yeah, there's a couple like universities that I was just Googling some the other day. There's some universities that are starting to, like UCLA has a hemp or a cannabis research program. So there's, I mean, because again, it makes money. So people are going to start to study it and more researchers are going to go to it. I went to the University of Colorado at Boulder, and before they even made it like legitimate, we would always walk by the gym and you could smell weed like from, or, you know, you could smell it coming from like the sewer system. So, you know, they know what they're doing. They just try to keep the money away from you. That's all.
I would just do a search, but like I said, Excelsior is a an online program, and they'll be offering that. And there are a number of universities. Everyone's getting on the hemp cannabis bandwagon. So
Maya, did you see any additional questions from the audience come in, or any from Earth Guardian?
No, there's no more questions that I'm seeing. So yeah, I mean, I just wanted to thank everyone for being part of this. I see a few people have to leave now. I guess it's almost at an hour and a half. So just gonna say, you know, thank you, and I'll give it to Jessica now from Mother Hemp. And yeah, it was nice listening to all of y'all.
So I just wanted to say thank you so much to all of the speakers, Mary, Danielle, Luis, Arissa. Thank you so much. And thank you, Maya, for holding the space here today. I'm really grateful for your work in the space, each of you I've been following, and just really appreciating the activism and everything that you're doing in the space that you're holding in your communities, and also for your time today and sharing your wisdom here and these action steps with the Earth Guardians. We really appreciate you. And thank you, Earth Guardians, for collaborating on this with us. If anybody has any final words that they'd like to say, feel free, or we can close it down. And I just want to say happy full moon. I know that it's a tricky one right now, but we're getting through it, and we're all here, and we could hear a lot of each other speaking, even though some of it was going in and out. We still made it through. And I appreciate everyone's time today and just making the space to show up for this really impactful conversation. We truly appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye, y'all.
Thanks
Yeah,
for
have a
great
good one.
conversation.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.